Our next presenter is Elizabeth DeYoung. Elizabeth is an MLIS student at Western. She earned a BA in English from Clemson University in 2007 after completing a semester abroad in South Africa, and has since taught English as a second language in Spain and Canada. Currently, she teaches ESL in London and tutors high school and university students online in the areas of English and essay writing.
The hit Showtime series Homeland begins with Marine Sergeant Nicholas Brody's return home from 8 years of captivity in Iraq, during which it is suspected that he has been turned from a loyal American soldier into a terrorist working for al-Qaeda. As the season progresses, the audience begins to catch a glimpse of what happened during his captivity to turn him into an al-Qaeda operative. In a flashback, we learn that Sergeant Brody witnessed a U.S. drone strike kill dozens of children at a nearby school, and then watched as the U.S. government denied everything on international news. This moment becomes the pivotal point for Sergeant Brody and for the ensuing plot of the show. And so without giving out too many spoilers, I'll just say that the results are explosive. While Homeland paints a rather sensational portrait of the potential for government manipulation of the media, a close look at international news reveals that this isn't far from the truth. As we will see today, Canadian and American coverage of international news isn't fully meeting the informational needs of viewers. And as a result, academic libraries have the opportunity to offer a service which will, international broadcasting. First, I will discuss the need for diversity in international broadcasting. Then I will discuss problems afflicting diversity in international news coverage. And finally, I will explain why academic libraries ought to provide a solution. In order to discuss the problem of diversity in international news, it is important to understand what is meant by diversity in this context. In a discussion of the different criteria existing for determining diversity of news, Choi outlines several possibilities such as ideological differences, different channels of news gathering, or substantive differences in content, views, and decision-making processes. Whatever the criteria, critics agree that diversity is necessary in order for democracy to be successful. Robert Entman explains, where news is homogeneous, the venerable and quite reasonable assumption is that democracy suffers. Where news is more diverse, the potential for democratic influence over government officials and decisions increases. By providing access to multiple channels, perspectives, and ideologies, the media enables citizens to become more informed advocates in the political process. In international news, diversity becomes increasingly important, not only in the representation of multiple perspectives of international events, but also in the share time allotted to international events. In a study of U.S. viewers, it was shown that even increasing the amount of time dedicated to international events increased the perceived importance of those nations in the viewer's eyes. Diverse information in the media, therefore, leads to more informed citizens who are better equipped to participate in the discussion of national and international events. Despite the necessity of diverse information sources, current coverage of international news continues to be plagued by homogeneity in both the perspectives presented and time commitment to international events. One of the most striking instances of journalistic failure was noted by Robert M. Entman in his analysis of U.S. media representations of the U.S. strike in Fallujah in April 2004. While this attack resulted in the deaths of nearly 600 Iraqi civilians, he notes that the most common description of casualties simply said something like several dozen Iraqis or several hundred Iraqis died, without even mentioning the word civilian, and thus leaving open the possibility that all were combatants. Meanwhile, war opponents overseas provided a starkly different picture, framing the events as a massacre of innocent Iraqis by brutal Americans employing flawed tactics and careless excessive force. The result, he concludes, is that when a second offensive in Fallujah was made in November of the same year, the institutions of journalism, at least in the case of Fallujah, rendered the American government immune from even having to make its case. And I'll just note that in Canada, the reporting of this event was not significantly different. Although the reasons for this journalistic failure are more complex than a conspiratorial government cover-up, Entman identifies issues such as availability of reliable sources, and extremely dangerous reporting conditions, What clearly emerges is a dramatic portrait of the homogeneity of regional news in times of conflict, when the most impartial reporting is vital to the inner workings of a successful democracy. This issue of misrepresentation or oversight is not singular to the US, but representative of international reporting in many countries worldwide. Furthermore, the amount of share time dedicated to international events continues to be influenced by factors of regionalism, superpowers, and crises. According to a study conducted by Wilk, Heimprecht, and Cohen, in which the amount of time dedicated to international news coverage was studied for 38 countries, Canada devoted 44% of its shares to foreign news. And while this is an above average percentage compared to the other countries studied, Wilk et al. Note that this is largely a result of over half of foreign news reporting covering the US and another 8% covering the UK, with very little extra time remaining for the representation of other nationalities. For both Canada and the US, even when other nationalities are given coverage, the reports tend to follow what is often called the coups and earthquakes approach, in which nationalities are only represented in times of crisis or negative publicity. The result is that viewers may perceive other nations only for their negative events rather than for the positive events which they are also involved. As information professionals, we can either await the reform of national media outlets, or we can provide more access to international news sources ourselves. Providing access to international news sources affords many potential benefits, perhaps the most important being the provision of an information need. Television continues to be a popular news source for North Americans. Wilk et al. Note that since the advent of television in the middle of the 20th century, news has been an essential ingredient in TV programming. Wherever someone in the world tunes into a TV set, he or she will sooner or later encounter a TV newscast. Often these newscasts are the most heavily viewed programs, and by and large, they are the main source of information for many people, even with the growing use of the internet. Despite this, many libraries do not offer televised broadcasting outside of what is available online or through archives. As a result, they are neglecting one of the most important information sources accessed by users. While this service would enhance the collection of any library, academic libraries particularly stand to benefit as a result of an increasing shift in the focus of higher educational institutions toward the international context. In Ontario, a brief review of major higher educational institutions' strategic plans reveals a growing emphasis on internationalization. These plans coincide with trends in foreign affairs and international trade data from 2000 to 2010. In this decade alone, the number of international students enrolled in universities in Canada more than doubled, and the number enrolled in other post-secondary institutions quadrupled. And most of these students are coming to institutions in Ontario. Amit Chakma, the president of Western University, wrote for the Globe and Mail in August 2012 that he expected this number to double by 2022. International student enrollment will continue to increase, and as a result, libraries will need to adjust their collections to meet the needs of students who demand resources which are in their language and which represent more global perspectives. In addition to satisfying an information need of a growing international population, international broadcasting would contribute to the information needs of Canadian students. Providing access to international news enables other nationalities to represent themselves, providing a truly oppositional frame within which to view international events. This not only enables nationalities to provide their own interpretation of events, but also enables students to understand nationalities for more than their status as crisis-ridden, and more as equal players in the global scene. Further, in the event that these international sources are provided in a language other than English, international broadcasting may even help promote linguistic diversity and thereby improve the status of second languages and their speakers among student bodies. As all students represent the future leaders and advocates in Canada and abroad, access to this quality of information is particularly pertinent as they seek to critically engage with and influence positively the world in which we live. Canadians have a strong tradition of appreciating international context and perspectives, but the current practices of reported news continue to reflect homogeneous viewpoints. While I am not proposing that the lack of diverse news sources will result in an onslaught of students seeking, like Sergeant Brody, to subvert the Canadian government with potentially violent acts, we can only hope this is an American trait, I do see this lack of information as harmful to students' development of truly informed perspectives of international events. Academic librarians have the opportunity to expand the traditional concept of collections by providing access to international broadcasting. In doing so, they will fulfill an information need in their communities, contribute to the diversity of their own collections, and thereby support the needs of all students at increasingly international places of higher education. Thank you.